Sleep is the enemy of the movement. We have some very important work to do. We had a very lively discussion last night about a number of topics. And what was clear about last night, there are a number of issues that we want to address, from issues around teacher quality to issues around the use of calculators in mathematics. All of these are issues. So part of our challenge and part of our goal is going to be achieving some level of alignment. Alignment in how we create this pipeline so that we can provide all students a fair and substantive opportunity to learn. And when I talk about alignment, it reminds me of the story that I heard about this old Baptist preacher who was preaching one Sunday, and he said, you know, we're going to go throughout the city and grab all of the alcohol and dump it in the river. And the congregation got roused up. Then he said, then we're going to go all across the state and grab all of the alcohol and dump it in the river. The congregation got roused up even more. He said, then we're going to go all across the nation and grab all of the alcohol and dump it in the river. And the congregation gave him a standing ovation, and he sat down and he turned the service over into the hands of the director of music. And the director of music said, let us turn to page 357, hymn 357, let us drink from the river. It is important that we have alignment in the work that we do so that we ensure that we're working from and for the same cause. And while many of us have come from different roads to get here, different states, different parts of the country, the spirit of why we're here is all the same, that we want all students to have a fair and substantive opportunity to learn. AQE, you are here today from New York because after battling Governor Cuomo on the sunsetting of a millionaire's tax, after cutting more than $1 billion out of the budget, you saw some victory last week in getting the governor to put $2 billion back. But yet you recognize that there's still more work to do because the budget is $5 billion short. But you're here. Young People's Project, you're here because you believe that education not only should be a civil right, but should be a constitutional right. And you've made that clear. Mississippi, you're here because you recognize after dealing with Governor Barber for years that it's time to provide all students in Mississippi access to a high-quality education. Arkansas Rural School and Community Trust and the Public Policy Panel, you're here because you recognize that all children in Arkansas should have access to early childhood education and be on grade level reading by 3rd grade. Dignity in Schools, you're here because you recognize that we can't grow as a country if we're pushing out, suspending, and expelling over 50% of those that we should be graduating. CEJ, the Coalition for Education Justice, you're here because you recognize the importance of extended day learning, the importance of fighting for equity. Neighbor to Neighbor, you traveled from Massachusetts and Massachusetts budget and policy because you know the importance of fair taxes and generating revenue so that we can ensure that all students have access to an opportunity to learn. Young elected officials, you're here because you've been elected to do a job, and you want to do a job that goes beyond just doing what's politically feasible and doing what's educationally sound. And AEJ, the Alliance for Educational Justice, you're here because you challenged our president and Congress, and you said, reauthorize ESEA. And in the first quarter, they told you, well, allow us to do it after the election. And then in the second quarter, they said, well, allow us to achieve some bipartisan compromise. And then in the third quarter, you recognize that bipartisan compromise is not a proxy for educationally sound policy. And now in the fourth quarter, they're telling you again, let us wait till after the election. And we're all here because we recognize that we've waited 4 quarters and now we're in OT. But OT is not overtime, but OT is opportunity time. Time to ensure that all students have access to a high-quality education. Opportunity time is going to be less about the questions that we ask now and more about reclaiming that moral authority that we talked about last night and offering the proposals that are necessary to move us forward. Opportunity time is not about us being on the defense any longer, but now it's time for us to move forward and push elected officials, candidates, and others to do what's necessary to make what's educationally sound, politically feasible, so that we can put into law and institutionalize many of these policies and practices that you all have been advocating for. That's why we're here. And I just believe that if we're here because though we've come many different routes to get here, that if we're here for this cause, it's time that we declare and we make it clear. From this day forward, we're declaring that it's opportunity time. And from this day forward, as we go back, we're going to hold those who have been put in places where they can make a change accountable to those principles that we have actually been advocating for. And some of those principles I want to highlight. In our Declaration of Opportunity. And each of you all will have a copy of this Declaration of Opportunity, either on your chair or on your table. But essentially, it's a 10-point commitment that says, first, we're going to commit and have others commit to ensure that all students have access to early education by 2020 and increase the percent of students on grade level reading by 100%. Because we know that if we are going to achieve any target to continue to maintain a strong democracy, we've got to ensure that all students have access to early childhood education. The data is clear, the research is clear, it's highly effective, it's a high return on investment, and it's something that should be guaranteed to all. And this is a principle that the Grade Level Reading Coalition has been an advocate for and effectively pushing across the country. Commitment 2, we want to ensure that federal, state, and local policies include 3 critical pieces: a plan to restore each student behind grade level, a plan to provide broader access to the education components that provide all students an opportunity to learn, like early ed, like access to highly qualified and effective teachers, and a plan to provide a bolder approach to transform the existing ed system into a 21st century ed system. Because it's not about just giving our students more access to an antiquated system, but we've got to transform the system. And number 3, we want to advocate for the supports to better prepare, recruit, retain, and place effective teachers where they are needed, as well as the appropriate instructional support for ELL students. And I want to highlight supports. So we're not talking about a strategy where we push out over 50% of the teachers. We're not talking about a strategy of high turnover, because that's not educationally sound. We're talking about a strategy where we know that we have teachers who are prepared and that they have the supports to be highly effective and be retained where they are. Number 4, we want to set targets and implement policies to reduce racial disparities in school suspension and expulsion rates and cut these rates by 50% over the next 5 years. This is something, as I mentioned, that Dignity in Schools has talked about in several coalitions at the local, state and local level. Number 5, promote fair revenue and spending formulas to generate resources to support educational investments and opportunity, including fair taxes on the wealthy. Often it's said that when these discussions happen, you will see us on the program side of the conversation with the demands. We want more early ed. We want better facilities. But on the revenue side, you don't often see us. We've got to change that. We've got to ensure that we're talking on both sides of the table. This is what we want, and this is how you generate the revenue to get there. Number 6, we've got to restructure the use of incarceration in the criminal justice system to reduce the resources that are wasted on incarceration at the expense of education investment. Made it clear, if we invest on the front end, we can reduce the number of beds on the back end and recognize a cost savings. We can't continue to incarcerate and have the expectation, at the rate that we incarcerate, and have the expectation of educating the number of students we will need to educate. Number 7, ensure that parents, youth, and communities are substantively engaged in the transformation and systemic improvement of their public educational system. The Annenberg Institute has published several reports on how parent engagement is both transitive, and in communities where parents are engaged, you get higher educational outcomes. It's proven methods. Number 8, reduce by 50% the percentage of students entering post-secondary education in need of remediation by 2020. This pipeline that we're creating, a pipeline to become a global leader in post-secondary education by 2020, can only happen if we are able to bridge the gap between secondary education and post-secondary. Some states, we take New York City, where over 60% of the students require some remediation as they enter New York City's post-secondary institution. That's morally indefensible, because we're charging students thousands of dollars to pay for what they should have received in high school. Morally indefensible. We want to see a clear reduction in that. 9, make post-secondary attainment a primary benchmark and provide multiple pathways and financial support for all, including the children of undocumented immigrants. This population that we talk about as undocumented immigrants is a population that provides opportunity to our country. I don't know if you've recognized that if we are going to achieve this national goal that the president outlined of being a global leader in post-secondary education, we have to retain more than 8.2 million students. If you look at the population growth for white non-Hispanics, it's stagnant. If you look at the population growth for African Americans, it's pretty stagnant. If you look at the population growth for our immigrant population, that is our lifeline to meeting that goal. If we're able to provide those who bring their talents and skills a fair and substantive opportunity to learn, those who have been here, have gone through the educational system, they should have an opportunity to go through our system of higher education. And then number 10, finally, in order to do this, we have to employ all tactics from administration to litigation to agitation to bring this Declaration of Opportunity into reality now. And let's make it clear that that just doesn't start with us, but each person that is on any county board, school board, governor, congressional rep should be willing to use administration, negotiation, litigation, legislation, and even agitation to bring this forward. Because if this is about a movement, it's going to take us moving those beyond, again, what's politically feasible and doing what's socially and educationally sound. So this is a declaration that we're asking all of you all to sign on to. It's a declaration that we want to continue to improve. It's a declaration that we want to hold electeds accountable for signing on before they get in office. Because at any point, at any part of our agenda, they will say, yes, I support early education. Yes, I support teacher quality. Yes, I support equity. But the devil's in the details. Do you support this reduction by 50% by 2020? Do you support providing each student an opportunity? And so it's opportunity time. And in order to meet this time, we're asking you to sign on to this Declaration of Opportunity. And you have it there. You could sign on through your cell phones, just texting EdOp to 22828. Text EdOp to 22828. Or you can go on the OTLcampaign.org website and sign on. But I hope that you would take it back, and we will provide additional supports to you so that you can take it back and begin within your local and state communities to have others sign on to this declaration. And what's important are the benchmarks in the declaration. We're not just asking for them to sign on to an idea, but we're asking them to sign on to targets and benchmarks in order to put the policies forward in order to meet those benchmarks. Is that something that we want to do? Do we want to hold our electeds and policymakers and others accountable? Do we want to hold our coalition partners accountable? Hold ourselves accountable? Because the president has set this man-on-the-moon goal of the U.S. being a global leader in post-secondary education by 2020. And you can't have a man-on-the-moon goal if you have a policy trajectory that's sending us straight for a two-story building. The policy has to align with the goal. And right now we have policies that don't often align with the goal. And over the course of the next several months, the Opportunity to Learn campaign will begin to put forth policy proposals that will help put us on that trajectory. Because it's important, again, we're not going to move by just the questions we ask, but it's time for us to begin to provide the policy proposals. So over the next couple of months, we're going to offer policy proposals that you all can localize. We're going to offer the shells, give you something that might be helpful to move at the state or local level. The first we will announce today, I talked about a little bit last night, is that for years we have known that there are students who are behind grade level. How many of you have students in your community behind grade level in reading or math? How many of you all have known that for years? If I was to ask, what is the plan to help them recover? Some might say, well, you know, they opened this charter school for 200 students in your city where there are over 6,000 behind or 10,000 behind. But if we look across the nation, there are over 20 million students behind grade level in reading and math. 20 million. So charters that only educate 4% of our students won't get us there. Not attacking charters, but saying it's not an instrument for the type of systemic change that we need. So we're saying that we believe that education is a human and civil right, and as such, that right should be attached to each student. So what we're calling on is for every student that is behind grade level a year or more, that they be given a personal opportunity plan. And you have this plan outlined, a one-pager in your chair also. A personal opportunity plan. And as a part of that plan, they would receive additional academic supports, whether it's tutoring, extended day learning, summer enrichment programs, additional social supports, mentoring. How many of y'all know we already have the data that proves having a mentor actually works? And I'm not talking about having others try to say, well, let's find some volunteers to mentor, but mentors that are paid for out of the city and state coffers. And I've said this over and over, there's some who say that that's too radical, look at the budget crisis, but we pay for probationary officers out of the city and state coffers every year. And we pay them to mentor our people, to send them to a place where it costs more to keep them. It seems to me that we will want to invest on the front end, minimize the need on the back end, and recognize that cost savings. So let's ensure that they have additional academic supports, additional social supports, and last, we know that there are health barriers. We know that there are health challenges that serve as barriers to our children's opportunity to learn. Dental, eyesight, mental health. Let's ensure that those students that are a year or more behind have those checks as a part of their opportunity plan. And this is not a plan that they would stay in perpetuity, but it's a plan that would sunset after 2 years. Ensure that there could be a case made to say why a student should extend it for an additional year, but we want to make sure that there are the intense inputs are provided and supports that are necessary so that students can catch up. And while a student is under a plan, there should be a different disciplinary policy governing that student. It's not the knee-jerk reaction of suspend or expel. If you must discipline with suspension, in-school suspension. If you must discipline without a school suspension, suspend to a mentoring program, a faith-based institution. But wherever the child is sent, educational services should be maintained. And finally, if there are schools where over 1/3 of the students are eligible for an personal opportunity plan, what we would say is the district should take some efforts to connect those services directly to the school. And it's an approach that a number of organizations have talked about, doing a comprehensive needs assessment, but connect those plans directly to the school and build the type of community schools that the Broader and Bolder Coalition and Annenberg and others have talked about. So this is our thought leadership in this proposal. And I do think it's time for us to offer the proposals, localize them, but then advocate for them, because this is opportunity time. If we look at the graduation rates at 50% and for Black and Latino males under 50%, I'm not sure that we have another 10 years where we can sit on our hands and play politics as usual. So I'm glad that you made your journey here today. I'm glad that we have a group of advocates who said, if it's to be, it's up to me. But I'm also excited because we have everything that we need to do the job. And it takes committed individuals who are willing to come to places like you are today and force themselves to share ideas and become aligned. So I say that sleep is the enemy of the movement today, because we are building a movement today, and we are also building the structures for a campaign that we will push through administration, through legislation, litigation, agitation, whatever it takes, because we represent a population that whatever it takes is the population valuable enough for us to fight at that level. And as a part of our commitment, we were able to recruit someone who can help us coordinate in providing the supports necessary for you all to push this campaign at the local level, because it's your campaign. I'm glad that we now have on board a new national director of the Opportunity to Learn campaign, someone who was a teacher in the classroom, who taught social studies in DC public schools, so she has a little street cred. Fairfax, someone who has her master's in education, secondary education from George Washington, and someone who has done the tour in DC, who's worked on the public policy side of the issue. And that's why I think we're blessed to have as your supporter, as your director, as the person, as your liaison to provide you the support that you need in order to be better advocates, stronger advocates, and the resources that you need. I want to announce your National Director of the National Opportunity to Learn campaign, Tina Dove. Help me in welcoming Tina Dove.
Good morning. Being a teacher, I'm respectful of the fact that first thing in the morning was always the worst period of the day. It was for me. I know it was for my students, but I'm hoping that you are invigorated and ready to go, because we are so ready to have you here. I can't begin to tell you how at peace I am to see your faces. Just knowing that you traveled across the country to come here and to be with us in this summit warms my heart in a way that I can't even properly express. So thank you so very much, all of you, for being here. I know you could be anywhere else today, and this early in the morning. You could be sleeping. You choose to be here, and that measures to me. It means something to me, so I'm so glad that you're here with us. The summit, we're very specific when we thought through this summit and what we wanted it to look like and how we wanted it to be. And throughout the process, one of the things we said repeatedly is that we did not want this summit to be something you came to, you listened to people talk to you, talk at you, you became better informed, but you left sort of feeling like, oh, I'm a little smarter today than I was yesterday, but okay, now what? We wanted this to be a place where we could come together as a family, people in struggle, to talk about the issues, to get updated on the issues, to meet and learn about each other, and to have the last piece of the puzzle put very firmly in place. And that is to leave this place knowing what's next. To be able to answer the question, okay, now what? What are we all going to do? What are our marching orders? And let's get to it. So my goal with this summit, and my goal with the time here that we have with you, is to make sure that we successfully get to that space. That at Saturday at 1:30 in the afternoon, when you leave here, when you depart, you will know what the next steps are. You will know who are the people in the struggle with you, and we can hit the ground running at 1:31 p.m. on Saturday to move this campaign forward. Towards that end, I want to encourage networking. I know you all do that very naturally, and I know sometimes that when you come to these kinds of events, there isn't a whole lot of time to do that. We've built into the day time for you to do that. We've built space into this conference place for that. To the left of you is an area that we are calling the OTL Cafe and Resource Center. Many of you have brought materials with you that you want to share to help others know more about you, your movement, the work that you're doing. We encourage you to put it in that space, mill about there. That's where all the coffee breaks and things are going to be, so you're going to be kind of forced to be in that space. But take this opportunity to meet someone else. I've found in the work that I've done here so far and the travels that I've done is that so many of you know the work you're doing in your own state, in your own community, but you don't know that somebody in another state, in another area, is doing the exact same work, and you all don't know each other yet. I want to correct that. I want you all to know each other in this struggle, because that is that connectivity that's going to make this national movement stronger. So please network as much as you can. Build those relationships. I wanted to focus my comments this morning very specifically on one particular member, one particular aspect of our community, because I felt like after last night, which I think was a very good start off, I think some people kind of left there feeling, all right, this is good. Some people left there kind of agitated and not so happy. But one particular group that I know felt uncomfortable, and I want to speak directly to them this morning, are the youth members. I know there were some that left last night feeling like you didn't have a space, your voice wasn't heard, etc. I want to be very, very clear with you. You will not, at this summit or in this movement, be relegated to a space of silence. I, as your campaign director, will not tolerate you being relegated to a space of silence. This movement, this struggle is yours. And we, as the adult people in this room, stand firmly behind you as you lead us in this struggle. This is your struggle. Do not for 1 minute in this house will you feel like you have no voice. So take advantage of that opportunity. Teach us, let us know what's going on, and we've got your back. Be clear about that. I also wanted to make sure we're very clear about the fact that we cannot do this work on a national level unless we are a united people and a united campaign. This is the people's campaign. It's never been anything but, and it is the people's movement, and it's never been anything but. So we will focus our attention as a group and as a people in this struggle to make this movement stronger and to make it move forward. Thank you again. Thank you so very much for being here. We can do this. We will do this together. And I am so excited to have you all here to be a part of it. And it is my greatest life's honor to get to serve you and do this work with you, shoulder to shoulder. I'm in this with you, and I'm so proud to be here. Thank you so much for coming. I want to go ahead and pass the mic off to someone who is an amazing advocate, an amazing brother in the struggle and is one of my dearest, dearest friends who I believe is going to do great justice to the panel this morning in his role as moderator. David Johns, I could speak for hours about him. I won't, because I think by the time you hear him talk, you'll come to understand why I feel the way I do about him. David Johns is the Senior Education Advisor for Senator Tom Harkin in the Senate Help Committee. He is going to be our moderator this morning and get us started. So, David.
Good morning. So Tina mentioned being a teacher, and she excused you guys for being a little sleepy. I taught kindergarten, and in the morning they were ready to go. So we're gonna try that one more again. Good morning. All right, there we go. I want you guys to keep that energy. I want to invite the panelists up to take their seats while I sort of do the intro so that we can continue to run. Give them a quick hand as they come up. So my job today is to facilitate a conversation. Everybody say conversation. We are not going to talk to each other. We are going to start a conversation. Everybody say conversation. So you, as active participants, have two jobs today. Everybody say two jobs. There we go. The first job is to share the information that you receive. You didn't have to repeat that, but that works. Let's go with it. I like you guys. Share the information you receive, right? Some of us are really good about going to conferences. We get a little conference bag. We go home, make sure everybody knows we went to the conference. We share the bag, but we don't share the information. Some of y'all laughing because you know it's true. Some of y'all not laughing because you know I'm talking about you. So what I want you to do is make sure that you share the information. If you tweet, how many of you guys are on Twitter? All right, if you tweet, use hashtag OTL. Hashtag OTL. You can add me. Mine is at Mr. David Johns. All right, if you don't tweet, when you go home, at least commit to sharing your information with two friends, right? And not just friends that you talk to every day. Tina talked about networking, right? Coming to conferences like this are important because sometimes doing the work of trying to educate kids, as I say at the bottom of my emails, teach the babies, it's hard work, right? And so sometimes you don't want to have the conversation with the person who just doesn't get it, right? But you guys are here because you're capable of doing the hard work, right? Right? So what that means is you need to share the information that you receive about how important it is that we do the work to provide every child, every single child, regardless of the zip code they've been born into, the genetic code that they've inherited, every single child the opportunity to dream and then develop the tools to achieve those dreams, right? So that was the first one, right? You got that? That was a lot? Ask a friend if you need the footnotes. The second thing is you're going to participate. So we're going to start, we're going to facilitate a brief conversation. I'm going to ask everyone to talk a little bit about the work that they do as it relates to why they're here. I'll give a little bit of a preface. I'll give you a softball to get us started. And then I'm going to turn it over to you. So that everybody's thoughtful about this, so you can't say I didn't tell you. Here are my rules of engagement. You need to ask a question. Everybody say question. Don't pontificate. Don't give a manifesto. Don't even read a poem. Ask a question. Everybody say question. If you start to do anything but ask a question, I will interrupt you. I'm going to say sorry now, but I will interrupt you. That's just so we can continue with the conversation. Everybody feel good? Yes? All right. We're going to start the conversation with, actually, Tina, let me do this. Actually, in the back, let me have all the youth stand up, because Tina hit on a really important point. So all the youth leaders, will you stand up for a second? Right. So I will, there we go, Victor. Yeah, there you go, Victor. So I will look to you guys to help keep everybody grounded, right? I came to DC, Tina mentioned this, after teaching elementary school, being frustrated by what wasn't happening, and I felt like my voice needed to be into the conversation. So I took a pay cut from teaching in New York, and I took a fellowship on Capitol Hill to try and figure out how this conversation happens, right? I would come to events like this. I would see people like John get really excited because you could tell that the man was passionate about change, right? And develop relationships with people like Tina to try and figure out how to move things. But what's been critical in doing this work is remembering why it is that all of us are here, right? The young people that we care so much about, right? And so I want all of you guys, I mean that, I didn't say that jokingly, I want all of the young people here to make sure that you keep us grounded, that this conversation reflects the realities that you face in schools each and every day, and it anticipates the needs that you have developing in our society. So with that, I'm gonna start with Victor, right? So Victor's gonna kick us off. Victor is a youth leader. Victor's a youth leader who's passionate about education. Why don't you take a little bit of time and tell him about yourself, sir?
All right, my name is Victor Alquicera. Hi, everybody. I'm a sophomore at Roosevelt High School in Chicago. I'm a leader at the Albany Park Neighborhood Council, Voices of Youth in Chicago Education, and Alliance for Educational Justice. And I want to start by saying that in Chicago, when we think about opportunities to learn, we don't only think about the students, we also think about like the teachers' opportunities to learn. So that way they can improve on like anything that they're falling behind on, so that way they can teach their students. So now, that's one of the issues with Chicago education is the teacher evaluation. That's what we're working on right now. And back in 2010, Illinois State Legislature passed the new act, the Performance Evaluation Reform Act, and it basically stated that every school district in the state is required to implement rigorous teacher and principal evaluation systems. Now, the only problem with that is that the Chicago Public Schools is making it so that it's for firing teachers and not improving them, like showing them where they need work on. And they're also trying to emphasize the test scores. They're trying to like make that a big part on the teacher evaluation. Now, we, Voice, and Chicago Teachers Union, we've partnered, and we have like some shared demands, and one of them is like teacher evaluation should be used to help teachers improve instruction. Students should have voice in the teacher evaluation process because the students are the ones in the classroom. Test scores should not be given a lot of weight in teacher evaluation because some students aren't good test takers. You know, like when you're taking a test, you kind of stress out, you got times. Yeah. We also believe that in classroom observations by students and teachers. Again, they're the ones in the classrooms. So right now what we're doing is we're also holding a press conference in front of CPS and we're gonna release this.
He's prepared, he has notes.
Yeah. It's the Student-Teacher Principles of Unity on Teacher Evaluation. And we're basically just gonna like run through it and talk about it. And also another issue in Chicago is the zero tolerance with disciplinary code. But I don't really wanna get into that right now. I also have another one after this, a little workshop. And yeah, it's in the A3 workshop in Taft Room at 10:30, right after this. Yeah.
See, he said, I'm gonna tease you just a little bit so you know you wanna come. But I'm not gonna let you off the hook that easily. So, Victor, you're from Chicago,
Yeah.
right? And how many people listen to Kanye West? Not a whole, okay, so enough of people in the room. So he has a song called Murder to Excellence. And in his song, what he does is talk about and he compares the violence in some of our occupations abroad to the violence in Chicago, right? And he talks about how in one night there were 51 murders of young people, of people that look like those of us on this panel. And so for a second, I want you to talk about what it's like being a student living in Chicago, right? Where the goal is not only to go to school and get a good education, but it's to get to and from safely.
Well, kind of buff, so. I don't know. I don't really get picked on that much. But I've seen it around me. Just recently there was a fight in the bathroom with two girls, twice in one day, in Roosevelt. There were videos and everything on YouTube. And I didn't really like see the whole thing, but I saw like she had black eye and everything, and she's most likely gonna get suspended because it was in the bathroom of the school. So, and it was also on YouTube, so everyone's seeing it, and eventually, like, the school will find out. So there's a lot, like, of violence around that area where I'm from. I don't really know about other areas, I stay in my area. It's cozy. Yeah. And basically, yeah, there's like a lot. It's not like it is kind of hard because you're in that area and you're trying to focus on getting a higher education, and there's like people running around shooting each other and getting into fights, and it's not healthy for like a kid growing up like that.
So give this young man a round of applause. So two very important points that we're going to come back to. Becky, I'm going to come to you, but first we're going to talk a little bit about community engagement given the last piece of the conversation. But we talked a lot about the importance of teachers, right? And how often we've talked about the need to assess students to see where they are. And the more recent conversations about the way in which we assess educators, right? How many of you guys just have gone through public school and have been able to identify the good teachers? Did you have a test to do it? No, but you knew, right? So the challenge for us is trying to figure out how to translate that internal gut feeling when you know it and you see it to something that's fairly objective, right? So I'm actually going to flip that, given that. Becky, why don't you talk about, Becky Pringle is the secretary and the treasurer of the NEA, the National Education Association, the nation's largest education association representing teachers, administrators, and those committed to the movement. She is a committed educator. She's a classroom teacher, which I always like to note and celebrate because far too often you see people in this conversation who do not know what it's like to be in a classroom. She has more than 31 years experience in Pennsylvania and has done quite a bit, including chairing the NEA's executive committee on ESCA reauthorization. Why don't you talk a bit, if you can, a little bit about the points that were touched on in terms of teacher evaluation in your opening remarks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am a middle school teacher from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I want to congratulate and thank the Schott Foundation and John and Tina for doing this incredible work. And I want to thank you too, David, for starting us off with Victor. He's the reason why. Let us never forget, he is the reason why. I am very proud to represent the National Education Association, our over 3.1 million members, and our 3.1 million members who have dedicated their lives to educating this nation's children. Our mission speaks to the fact that we are advocates. We're advocates for education professionals, and that we are dedicated to uniting not only our members, but the entire nation to fulfill the promise of public education. That's what we're about. Just yesterday, we had a public unveiling of our Commission on Effective Teachers and Teaching report. Almost a year and a half ago, our president, Dennis Van Roekel, put together a group of highly accomplished teachers. They came from all over the country, diverse group of folks, but they were all accomplished teachers, from national board certified teachers to teachers of the year, to our teachers who have gone on and gotten doctorates in education. Those who not only were dedicated to the children in their own classrooms, but beyond their classroom doors. And they worked for over a year and, okay, sorry. I'll try to be really still. Am I good?
Now she's afraid to move. You all right? Go ahead.
Very still.
Just use your teacher voice.
Yeah, right, exactly. And they came together and they talked about that issue of evaluation. They talked about a lot of other things too. First of all, they talked about teachers taking responsibility and owning and leading their own profession. And as they talked about that, we talk a lot about, Victor talked about that, evaluation systems that are designed to be gotcha systems instead of grow ya systems. Evaluation systems should be very clear and focused on improving professional practice. That's what they are supposed to do. We know that there are teachers in classrooms who need to be exited out of the profession. But you should never design a system around that. You should be designing that system on making sure that they are getting the professional development training and needs, supports that they need to grow and get better. And so this commission is calling for those evaluation systems to be built to a large degree on what we call peer assistance and review. So that their colleagues are the ones that are coming into their classes. They're not coming in for 20 minutes every 3 years to determine whether they're effective teachers or not. They're not using a test to determine whether they are effective teachers or not. They are calling for being held responsible for student learning and all of the components of that, making sure that we look at our children as the whole child they are, making sure that we provide them with the services and supports, surrounding them with the resources they need to be successful, and that we as teachers need to take responsibility for that. And any evaluation system that's designed builds that into the evaluation. And so we are dedicated to making sure that throughout this nation, we have these kind of systems set up, peer assistance and review, so that we are training our accomplished teachers to evaluate each other and holding each other responsible for improving professional practice. And then, in addition to that, we know that we can't do it alone. Not only can't we do it alone within the school, we can't do it alone within the entire system. And so we are calling for training our teachers to make sure that they know how to reach out into the community and leverage community assets, making sure that they know how to deliver education to every student, regardless of what they bring to the classroom, and making sure that they need to open up their doors and learn from each other. They need to go into each other's classrooms and support each other. They're not only responsible for the students in their classroom, they're responsible for all of the students in that school.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Everybody give a round of applause. So in DC, we like to talk in a lot of adages. And one thing that I want everybody to take away is, and repeat it after me, say, grow you, not got you.
Grow you, not got you.
I like that, right? That was, I thought, particularly eloquent as we have conversations about how it is that we help educators. I think effectively what I heard you say is that we need to make mediocrity uncomfortable, right? We need to make it such that everybody in the school building is committed to excellence. Everybody understands that every child inherently wants to figure out the world around them and their place within it, and is striving toward ensuring that every child not only has that opportunity, but maximizes that opportunity. And if we do it in a thoughtful way like you've articulated it, if you're lazy, or you're not committed, or you don't really believe in those kids, it should show. Right? How many of you guys have been around your friends and somebody tries to, tell a joke or jump into the conversation and they just miss that step and it feels a little awkward? Right? That's kind of how we want to make it when we're talking about bad teaching. So again, let's say that one more time. Grow you, not got you.
Grow you, not got you.
Perfect. And the last thing that Becky talked about was the importance of acknowledging that educators can't do it alone. Right? How many teachers are in the room? That's all right. That's just my background music. There are a couple teachers in the room. Right? Far too frequently when we think about the challenges that all of our students face, and Victor talked a little bit about one of them, sort of violence generally, we fail to acknowledge all of the responsibilities that educators have. And sometimes in doing so, we miss opportunities to acknowledge the role of parents and engage community partners, right? So with that in mind, I want to invite Wendy, who's the president of the Public Education Network, or PEN, one of the largest community-based school reform networks in the country, to talk about the importance of making those strategic connections.
Thank you. I also want to, can you hear? No, okay. Can you hear now? All right.
Maybe
Yep.
you want to come up here? No? You want to give up your chair? Okay. Anybody got a joke?
Now, this never quite happened to me in public, but
That's all right. The first thing you learn in DC is that you have to be flexible,
that's the truth.
right? Sometimes you're sitting in a meeting with a member and the buzzer goes off because there's a vote on the floor.
Yeah.
Yesterday, if you were sitting down planning your day, if you did anything like me, you looked on the TV and thought for a second they were having a flashback to Virginia Tech, but realized no, people are actually still crazy. Just got to be flexible. Got to roll with it.
I
Go ahead,
think
Miss
you
Wendy.
can hear me now. All right. Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm Wendy Puriefoy. I'm with Public Education Network. I want to congratulate the Schott Foundation and John and Tina. Schott has been doing this for a long time. This is what, the third summit, and we'll be back here for at least the next 10 years doing this work, because that's what it takes. It takes a long time. I'm the daughter of a teacher and the sister of a teacher. So one of the things that we think about is schools cannot do it alone. I actually had a teacher who wrote my grammar text in school because she felt that the textbook that we had wasn't good enough. So I had the opportunity to go to a great public school, but that public school was supported by a community, because even back then, less than 25% of the population had school-age children. So one of the things that we've got to think about is, how do we engage and educate the public to know what it needs to know and understand, and also know that they have three key responsibilities that they have to carry out. One is, it is the public that sets expectations for the quality of education that kids receive. It's either what they will tolerate, how bad it is, or what they demand for how good it's going to be. The second is that they elect public officials to carry out those expectations, and we have to monitor them. We have to make sure that they do their jobs, and if they don't do the job, then we have to take them out of office. And so when you think about it, less than 5% of the people in local communities turn out for school board elections, and yet the school budget is at least 50% or more of the town's budget. So there's just not enough full participation. The third is that we allocate resources. So we either say we're going to give more money, either through our tax base or through the bond measures that we're willing to pass, or we're going to allow the money to be spent on things that we know are not working. But we are more in charge of the quality of our schools than we give ourselves credit for. So at Public Education Network, we are a network of community-based organizations, born in communities, set up by these communities, to really focus on improving the achievement gap for the children who need it the most. They started out working with teachers and really supporting teachers in their professional development, and now have really moved to very sophisticated work with teachers, and were the incubators of the teacher residency programs that you see happening around the country, and they have done it in cooperation with teachers. The other work that they have done is really to help build communities' intellect about what does it take to have a good school. What you need to know when you're electing a school board member. How do you analyze the budget? What are the sets of things that a citizen needs to know and understand in order to be an effective participant in that community and to be able to be accountable? We've been working together for many, many years, and each local education fund located primarily in urban areas around the country has worked closely and partnered with their school district. They have raised and distributed over $4.5 billion over the course of their being around since 1983, and all of that money has been applied to increase student achievement and to support the various strategies that would increase student outcomes. We just made a recent commitment, and we are happy to sign on to the compact of the Schott Foundation. We do believe that public education is a civil right and the access to it. So we've committed ourselves to graduate 100,000 students over the next 2 years, graduate and put on track in the communities that local education funds serve. A group of 33 of our 77 members across 34 states and the District of Columbia have come together and formed a compact that says we will work to put on track and graduate 100,000 students over the next 2 years. So that's our commitment to this opportunity to learn. It's going to take a lot of work to do that, but the most important part of that work that it's going to take is making sure that the public understands why it's a problem, that kids are not graduating, what it costs taxpayers, what it means in terms of the loss of money for this country. So we are going to be on a big education campaign to help Americans understand why we must have every child a graduate in this country ready to go on and enter college and succeed.
Please give Wendy a round of applause. So what I want to make explicit is the last point that you just mentioned, how utterly important it is for us in this room to make the case about why it is that we need to be having conversations about the state of public schools and opportunities to improve them and to ensure that all of our kids have an opportunity to learn, right? Because for some people, right, for those of us who do this work, we toil in it, right? That's our reality. But for a lot of people, they don't understand why that's even a conversation that needs to happen, right? It confuses me because anybody who's lived in a major metropolitan space or a rural community, right, over the last 15 years has seen the economic and social fabric of our country erode, right? There have been report upon report, whether we're talking about the Schott Foundation's report on the graduation rates of Black and Latino men, or the reports that came out of Teachers College several years ago quantifying the numeric cost of this crisis, right? In spite of all of that, we still need to have these conversations because people just don't get it. And those who do are often not acting in the best interest of our children. And so to be clear and to connect some dots, right, Becky and Victor gave you just pieces of the puzzle that paints the picture of the challenges plaguing our schools right now, right? And Wendy gave you a little bit of context to understand how it is that those problems are being addressed by the people who care outside and within the school. And before we open it up to you guys to get into the second deliverable, don't think I forgot, right? We have two more individuals who are going to speak about how to have this fight, right? Because John talked this morning about sleep being the enemy of the struggle, right? So to be clear, this is a fight, right? John often says crisis. I've been hearing him say crisis for the last 5 years. And he acknowledged early on that some of you guys are agitated. It's okay to be agitated. As long as you don't give up, let's channel it, right? And with that in mind, I want John to talk about how it is that he, as a superintendent, decided to fight the system, right? So to be clear, when you talk about movement, you have to have an inside strategy and an outside strategy. Watch how I set y'all up. John is going to talk about the inside strategy.
That's good.
Right? You see where I'm going with this? And then Alberto's going to talk about the outside strategy. And then we are going to have a conversation about how it is that we accomplish the 3 principles that Wendy set forth. Everybody got it? Let's go.
My name is John Kuhn. I'm superintendent. My context is a little unique. I'm from a very rural town in Texas. I have 380 students in my school. Our African American population is 1/2. That means 1/2 of one person, not half of my student body. Okay? I previously worked as a principal in a larger school. And this past legislative session in Texas, I was troubled, and a lot of teachers are troubled because of the devastating education cuts that we've seen. And what was most troubling is we don't fund schools equally in Texas. Some schools get $8,000 a student. Some schools get $4,000 a student. What troubles me is there's no data that's been published to show, is there a correlation between the complexion of your student body and the level of school funding you get? I think that correlation exists. I think the darker your student body is, the less funding your school gets. And all it takes is a scatter plot, but nobody's built that scatter plot. A lot of us were troubled when these cuts came, and I was so troubled because our expectations are rising, but our resources are dropping. You're asking me to do more with less. And it's vital what I do. What I do is vital. So I was so agitated, I wrote a letter, and it was inappropriate, and it was ugly. And I addressed it to my legislators. It was an open letter. And it was based on the Alamo letter where William Barrett Travis said, "Come and help us. We need help." I just copied his letter, and I changed it, and I applied it to education. I said, "We need help. We need help." And there are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of white Republican teachers in Texas that are troubled right now because of what they see going on. We want to help children. Policy hinders us. And accountability in schools, there are a lot of things I could sit up here and gripe about accountability in schools. But I want to point to one thing that we have to hold on to, and that is a disaggregation of data. We never agonized over the poor children like we agonize over the poor children now. Now, you can take tests or leave them. You can figure out a different way to measure our progress, but we have to disaggregate data so that I agonize over those children and make sure I do everything I can to help those children. I have to do that. I have to be pushed. I don't like to be pushed, but I have to be pushed, and my teachers have to be pushed. So we've got to hold on to disaggregation of data. But we're at a crossroads right now in our schools. And there are two ways we can go because accountability has gotten us to this point. And we can either go this direction and move towards exclusive schools that some kids get into that are funded privately, or we can go the direction of wraparound services where we address the needs of these kids and really make a difference. The last point I want to make, and where this has brought me and where I think this is bringing a lot of people to in my community where I'm at, looking at unfairness and realizing it's there. See, it's been easy, I think, to ignore unfairness that hits other communities. I had my first conversation with a black person in college. First time I ever had a conversation with a black person. And that's the world I'm from. I'm from my world. I live in my tribe. I have to go back and face those people, live among those people, be respected among those people. So we defend ourselves and we defend our own and we hold on to what we've got and we don't share. Okay? But what a lot of teachers are realizing is you've asked us to save these poor children. You've asked us to lift up these poor children, minority children. And what we're running into is a glass ceiling where I can only go so far with passion. I can only go so far with talented expertise and good lessons. I can only go so far because there's a societal problem holding me back. See, we don't have an educational crisis, we have a societal crisis. And so the last thing I want to share with you, until we replace data-driven accountability with data-driven equality in this nation, we're not going to fix it. If I was in charge, the federal government would say, we're going to have a data-driven equality system. The 50 states will each publish their data. We're going to set benchmarks. Equality and incarceration. If 30% of your state population is Hispanic, then 30% of your prison population should be Hispanic. And if it's not, you're going to work to get that in that direction. Data-driven equality would look at health care, equality in health care, equality in college enrollments, equality in clean air and clean water, equality across the board, child abuse rates, drug abuse rates, equality in income levels, equality in employment levels. If we're not measuring that, publishing that, holding states accountable for moving in that direction, we're not doing our job, and we're holding teachers back from doing their job. So that's kind of where I'm at as an educator, saying we're working, but it's not enough. The next step is school reform that steps outside the school and helps the community. Thank you.
John Kuhn for Congress.
I won't get votes where I'm from.
Look, so time out. You guys laugh, but I say that with all sincerity. Tina said this in my introduction, and I should have done a little bit of housekeeping. If there are any reporters in the room, at least what I say is off the record. I work in D.C., know the game you're playing. So the point I just want to make, there are two. One, I like John. I like John a lot because you could tell the moment he opened his mouth that he was passionate about this subject. And there are similar moments where I get so excited that I want to contain it, but I just can't. So I feel that, and I felt it because I do this work every day, right? Tina mentioned that I am a federal policy advisor on the Senate Help Committee, the committee responsible for reauthorizing ESEA, Elementary Secondary Education Act, the bill everybody likes to hate as No Child Left Behind, right? In doing that work, I am the only one, single, me, whole me, only black man, period, right? Not something that should be celebrated when we're talking about conversations that impact people that look like me, that have come from the communities that I've come from rural Texas or from Los Angeles, California, right? And so it's important that we hold on to that passion and that we also think about ways in which we can leverage the experience of people who are in the classroom to inform the debates that are happening in the halls of Congress. Right? With that in mind, before we open up this conversation, everybody again say conversation. We're going to turn to my brother Alberto, who is from the West Coast, which just happens to be the best coast, right? Don't do it. We were doing so well. He's from Los Angeles, and he is a community organizer, right, in South Los Angeles. We talked about violence earlier. I visited a school this past summer where kids had to walk through 3 gang territories in a 15-block radius, right? It's real in the streets where this man works, right? So can you tell them a little bit about the challenges in terms of helping to enroll people and facilitating this process?
Sure. Good morning. First and foremost, it feels good to be in front of you and be able to say that I'm on the record with everything I say. Considering I was at the department for a couple years, and at the department I felt like the public narrative was all about the achievement cap and accountability. The public narrative was oftentimes about this global competition with India and China. And now that I'm back home, back on the streets, and back with my community, it's just a reminder that that public narrative, while it may be true or not true, is just not what we're dealing with on the ground every single day. I think that for us, it's very simple. It's about valuing human life, valuing human potential, and removing the barriers and obstacles that get in the way of making that potential possible. And that is at the very core of our work. It's at the very core of what this country is supposed to be based on, this notion of democracy. And until we put a human face back on this problem of public education not serving all students, if it's simply based on numbers and data, we'll never be able to move forward. We can have the best research. We can have the best ideas. We can have the best campaign. But our ideas in our campaign and our policies and our research will always be on the periphery unless we build power. And I feel like, for me, the single biggest lesson I learned in the little bit of time I was able to work and travel, but certainly reinforced back home in South Los Angeles, is that we have to build power. And I just want to take a second to think about the Occupy movement and the impact it's had on this country and the crossroads that the Occupy movement is at. It certainly has captured the imagination of the country. It certainly has had an impact on the public narrative, where when I was in D.C., the Tea Party took over and are slowly coming back to take their castle, right? Come to take their Congress, and they're itching to get their White House back. They're ready to get it back because they just don't, I think it's too black, right? Yes, I'm no longer working for government. It's great. And there's a clear mobilization. And for the first time now, we have a country that's mobilizing, pushing back, and says, you know what? Corporations are not people. The 1% needs to be held accountable for their corruption and for their greed and for their creation of inequality. And so what I want to take out of that page around what the Occupy movement has done is that we have to think bigger, right? And what I appreciate about the Opportunity to Learn framework is that we're trying to think bigger. But if the Occupy movement, or if we do not put power behind our rhetoric, we'll be continuing to have this conversation over the next 5-10 years. For me, what does political power mean? How does it express itself? It expresses itself in several ways. One, if we can get 20 or 30 of our states to change its funding formulas and create reasonable, sound tax and fiscal policy that really hold the wealthy accountable and provide fair taxes and provide the resources that are affecting our communities, that's going to begin to shift the debate. Because we're not only talking about changing things, we're actually moving resources. But in order to do that, we have to build political power, we have to register people to vote, we have to build an apparatus, and we have to build the values base that brings all of us together, whether you're white, black, brown, yellow, Asian, middle class, and poor, to vote on the kind of issues that really matter. So I think for me, to answer this question around the outside strategy, power is at the center of it. And one of the things I appreciate about the Young People Project and what they're doing about their push is that it's not just about an opportunity to learn for them. It's about our fundamental right to learn. And we have to remind folks that this is not just about a handout to give me an opportunity. This is a fundamental human and civil right that is promised in our country. And until we put that human face to it, none of that will change. Last but not least, I think that one thing that will also change the equation. And we have to figure this out, how to do it together, leveraging the work of the Public Education Network, leveraging the work of the Opportunity to Learn, leveraging our relationships with NEA, is we have to absolutely put a human face to the problem. We need to have panels with 5 victors up here. I'm just saying, we need to put Victor and all of the youth in here, and we need to stand behind them and go to Congress and let them know, let them speak to what their experience is. To close, in April of next year is the 20th anniversary of the civil unrest in South Central Los Angeles. And to be quite honest, the economic conditions and the educational conditions haven't changed much. I don't expect that another unrest or civil or riots, however you want to call it, may or may not happen. That's not really my point here. But my point is, how do we create the political will necessary to take the anger and agitation that folks felt around the civil unrest and channel it to something more reasonable around bringing about the changes that our communities need across the country to change this so-called achievement gap?
Give Alberto a round of applause. So one of the powerful points that we just mentioned is that power is at the center of the movement. And I think John and Tina, especially when acknowledging the youth in the room, helped us to also acknowledge that people are at the center of the movement. And essentially, I think the question that we're all grappling with is, how do we get closer to the tipping point, right? The point at which we, in the education space, start occupying classrooms and school buildings, right? I say this, and while you guys were talking, I had in the back of my mind, have you guys seen the movie The Lottery? Right? So I had in the back of my mind 2 scenes, one where they were having a debate. There's a woman who's a principal who's trying to ask for the opportunity to go into a school building, and she's literally battling with members of the city council about her credentials as a white woman trying to educate kids of color. And I paralleled that with the scene in which they were having a community meeting to talk about the fate of this school. And what was clear is that there were so many parents who were there to argue for this school building who probably never stepped foot in that building before, right? Who saw kids go in year after year, come out, fail year after year, sit on the corner year after year, and had not gotten to the point of being so upset that they wanted to occupy something. So at a minimum, I'd like for us to entertain the question, how it is that we get to the tipping point, right? This is now where we accomplish goal number 2. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Again, I stress the word question. There's a young lady up here with the mic, so if you have one, please raise your hand.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Josh Roffner. I'm with the National Assembly on School-Based Healthcare. There's been a lot of talk today and last night about teachers can't do it alone, educators can't do it alone. We see this in school-based healthcare, but I just wonder what it is that we in this room can do to really break down those silos and to say Medicaid is an education program, vaccinations are an education program, community transformation grants are an education program. So what is it that we can do to work together and make sure that we're all fighting together, not fighting for the same tiny pot of money, but work together on these issues that we know support student achievement?
Becky, will you take this one, and then Alberto?
I used the phrase before, whole child. We know that our children are not just about, test scores. That's not what it's about. It's about nurturing them in mind, body, and soul. And so you're absolutely correct. We have to bring to bear all of the resources. One of the things the NEA has done, we traditionally have worked with the U.S. Department of Education. That makes sense. But we've now reached out to the Health and Human Services and other departments, Department of Energy and Environment, because we realize that we have to bring all those resources to bear. As I listen to this conversation, what came into my mind is we all know in this room, power is not conceded. It's not. We have to own and we have to take our power. And when I think about probably the most important part of the Opportunity to Learn campaign is their understanding that the power lies in the collective action of you. Those folks on the grassroots, at the grassroots level, coming together and making sure that we surround our students with everything from safety making sure they go to schools where it's bully-free. We need to make sure they have health care. NEA was one of the leaders in the fight to pass our national health care, because we know that our children who come to our schools, if they are not healthy, they can't learn. If they don't have glasses, they can't learn. If they're hungry, they can't learn. We know that we have to provide the services for all of those children. So I would say to you that what you're doing here today, in fact, shout out to one of our NEA directors in the back from Milwaukee, what they are doing at that level, at the state and at the level of the city and counties around this country, to build that coalition of the willing, which you are, the coalition of the willing, to come together, parents, communities, service providers, to make sure that our students have the success that they are entitled to in this country.
Both Alberto and Wendy want to get in, so I'm going to also ask if you guys would be brief so we can get through as many as possible.
I'll be very quick. I agree. I think that what NEA is doing is on the right track. We think too narrow when we're only focusing on the Department of Education. We absolutely have to call on the entire federal government to engage in a new war on poverty, a war on poverty that's based on the principles of the poor people that are affected by the issues of this economic crisis. Until we call on all federal agencies to intervene to address the issues of poverty that affect our schools, it's not enough. But that demand alone won't be enough if we don't put our organized voice behind it. That's the only thing I want to say about that. I think we have to demand on federal government to do it, on our state government, and our local governments to make that happen.
Wendy?
I've often wondered why children didn't organize and say, I am not going back into that school until I have a school that is worthy of my mind, worthy of my community, and prepares me to live in a democratic society. I do not understand why children walk into schools every day and don't have books. So I guess my question would be, what would it take for us to have the children of this nation say, we are leaving until this is done?
Let's hold on to that. I definitely want to come back to that if somebody doesn't ask a related question.
Hello, my name is Christina Arasi. I am from Boston. I am a member of the Boston Student Advisory Council and as well as Youth on Board, and I want to direct the question to Victor. In Massachusetts, we passed the teacher's evaluation policy, and I want to know the statute of the teacher evaluation campaign in your state. And I want to know, do you know any other organization that is working around this campaign? Because we want to connect and work together and start a national campaign and to push this forward. So I want to know if your organization will work with us.
You better build a coalition. Go for it, Victor. So the question was the status of the legislation and then whether or not you were going to participate in this coalition she's offered.
Wait, what was the first question?
What's the status of the legislation? Do you know?
Status of the
The legislation around teacher evaluation. Do you know what's happening at the state level?
And
It's okay, let's do this. Tina Dove is gonna be responsible for getting you an answer on the status of the legislation. You see this woman right here? Make sure you hold her accountable, right? Everybody, y'all see that. So she'll get the first one. Then the second one is, are you willing to work in coalition with the young people in Massachusetts?
Well, Voice is right now thinking of expanding. So like we've partnered with different organizations already. So I think like working with Massachusetts would like help because we're not that far apart, right?
Right? That's all
Pretty
right. And as
close.
long as the goals are aligned, you can make up for the distance.
Yeah.
I see, is there one over here? Right here, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Roberto, I'm glad to see you're free. Thank you.
Wait a minute.
My name is Zakia Ansari. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Alliance for Quality Education, and I'm a member of the Coalition for Educational Justice. And as we sit here, we're sitting here watching our blackberries between yesterday and today because New York City is releasing 47 closures of schools, and we're waiting to see which school is going to be the one that gets the axe. And there's something wrong with that. In New York City, 117 schools have already been closed, and if you look at the data and statistics, our kids, especially kids of color, are still at the bottom. So clearly this strategy is not working. And so my question is, Roberto, you kind of touched touched on and around the organizing, which is what we do in New York City, right? It's parents of color that normally, like we heard yesterday, some people kind of
what's the
suggested
question?
that, sure, that we don't get involved, and we are involved in New York City and New York State. So what is it that we can do from the national level? Because clearly these policies are coming from there around school closures and transformation and everything else to be behind victors like you shared, as parents and community members like we are, to really push something because we're at the tipping point in New York.
I mean, I think we need to join the Opportunity to Learn campaign and build strategic relationships between these different national efforts, because I felt like one of the single biggest problems with organizing right now is that there's way too many silos, and there's way too many. There's the Alliance for Quality Education, there's the Alliance for Educational Justice, there's the Public Education Network, there's the Opportunity to Learn campaign. Can we build an umbrella large enough for all of us to fit? Is there a tent big enough for all of us to fit? And what the Occupy movement has done is they said, we are the 99%, everybody can fit. And so we need to take that model and get past some of our egos, past some of our agendas, and say, look, what are 3 or 4, I mean, we got 10 here. What are 3 or 4 things that we can really get behind? And we have the use of technology. I mean, the Arab Spring that took place all over the Middle East, so much of that was based on Facebook and technology. And I know that some of our parents, some of our communities aren't necessarily using all of that just yet, but we have to be much more creative to get past sort of the geographic and political boundaries we set in front of us. So for me, what role I want to play and help move that forward, at least back now I'm back at the coalition, is help to advance structures that allow more of us to work together across different geographies, across rural, urban, suburban. I mean, this connection with a brother from Texas is a big connection for us to connect with folks like you that are moving this issue so that we can all sit together. So that's for me how I think about that question.
Building a tent. Let's go to the back of the room over here.
African American males and other minority students have been the subject of a lot of legislation which has resulted in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But yet they have not been beneficiaries of the legacy. So my question is, how can we ensure that children with disabilities, even if they're in the regular classroom, have an opportunity to learn?
I'm going to ask John to take this one.
The question is, how can we be sure that children with disabilities have the opportunity to learn in the regular classroom? I know that that's at the forefront of a lot of what we do in the public schools, a lot of what we talk about in the public schools. And we struggle to provide students with equal access to the learning that goes on in the classroom. And from the teacher side, we run into difficulties trying to teach different levels of students at the same time. So that's a struggle that we deal with. One of the things that in Texas we contend with, one of the things that Texas has in place to push us in the right direction is a system called performance-based monitoring. What that requires us to do is to report data about our students with disabilities. Which tests do they take? Do they take the regular standardized test, or do they take a special version of that test? And there are benchmarks that we are required as a school district to meet. And if we don't, then there are consequences for our school. So that's the system that's in place to push us into public school where I'm at to educate those kids to the highest level possible. Does it work flawlessly? Probably not. Is this not working?
Oh, no, it's communication, Mike.
You're doing great.
Is there a better way? There probably is, but sitting here right now, I don't know what that is.
Can I,
So
can I add something?
1 second, just a quick check-in, because I'm about to get the axe. Okay, so let me just get a sense of how many more questions there are. Quite a few. There's never enough time to have this conversation, and I take that as a good thing. What I want to do is, I want you to get in really quickly.
Real quickly.
Real quick.
We need to hold our elected leaders accountable for the promise they made when IDEA was passed. They promised to fund that at a 40% level. That has never happened. The closest we ever got was 17%. And we know what happens. That funding gap gets passed on to the local level, and that's why our kids aren't getting the resources they need in those classrooms.
Let's quickly try and take both these questions, and then we'll see how many people we can answer. Let's go here first and then here. Just a question.
Jerry Kelman, Gamma Metro Chicago. We are organizing locally and nationally. We're getting our butts
Just a question, sir.
We're getting our butts kicked in the media, and What do we do about that, especially when our friends, and I mean that personally as well as politically, are leading the charge to take democracy out of education, leading the charge to close schools, liberal Democrats, Barack, et cetera. How do we stop getting our butts kicked in the media so they
How do
can
we
hear the
respond
story?
to the public conversation? Let's go over here with the young person.
So my question is just really quickly. The umbrella I see is that we should unify under a national student bill of rights. So my question is, when will we start advocating that student rights is the forefront of any opportunity to learn in the educational movement?
Okay, let's see if there's one more question on this side, and then we'll let the panel wrap it up.
Yes, I went to a closing high school. I'm currently working at closing high school. So my question is, what alternatives do you have to closing high schools? Because obviously it isn't working.
Okay, so what I want to do is start to my left. John, we're going to work our way down the panel. You can answer any of the 3 questions that were posed or offer some final remarks.
I think the answer to the first question is getting your butt kicked is the conversation. And you just keep getting your butt kicked and you keep kicking back. You go to the meeting, you have those conversations, and you stand there and say, this is not right. And let them come back and argue. The one thing about unfairness is it's indefensible in the end. That's one thing that there's a sea change going on where I'm at. A lot of very conservative educators are saying, okay, all these policies, it's not fair. And eventually, morality trumps rhetoric, eventually. And so you just have to keep having that conversation. And the question over here, can I get it repeated? I'm sorry, I forgot. Closing schools. Yeah. Closing schools. What was the question? What's the alternative to closing schools? Yep. The alternative to closing schools is funding schools appropriately. And schools with greater need more money. And schools with greater need wraparound services. And at some point, the people of this nation have to love poor children, black and brown children enough to give them what they need to be safe and strong. That's what has to happen. That's the alternative.
Give John a round of applause. Victor, final thoughts?
I have no comment at the moment.
Brother, you too smooth to have nothing to say.
Can I answer his question?
You can answer whatever question you'd
What
like.
was the question you had?
Let me ask you this. What would you say to encourage the youth who are not in this room to become a part of this movement?
Well, if you're not a part of it, you're the ones in the high schools right now. We're doing this for you, so that way you can get a better education. So if you don't join it, you're only making it harder for yourself.
Give the brother a round of applause. Becky, final thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. We need to make everything we do student-centered. Everything we do has to be student-centered. And we need to, as the adults in this room, we need to make a commitment to that. How do we take over what's going on in the public, and how do we stop being bashed? And we need to be putting forward a positive, proactive agenda. I could not agree more with the agenda the Opportunity to Learn campaign has put forward. That is a positive, proactive agenda that's very specific and calls for very specific actions, and we need to get behind that. And lastly, I would leave you with this. W.E. Du Bois captured it well. You know, we know that the freedom to learn is the absolute most important thing. We must fight to the last ditch. Do you hear me? We must fight to the last ditch to keep open the right to learn. We are the adults in this society, and we need to surround our children with the help and the resources and the love that they need to be successful.
Let's give a round of applause. Alberto, final thoughts?
3 quick thoughts. I think on the messaging, we need to encourage our funders to invest in strategic communications and build our capacity, to be able to have an impact. The opposition has a pretty well-oiled machine, and we need to build up our capacity to be able to engage in that conversation. Number 2, I think for the question that you asked about the Bill of Rights and students, for me, when the civil rights movement took place, and when the civil rights leaders weren't moving quick enough or were being too conciliatory, it was the youth that decided to launch the effort to do sit-ins and get on buses and make it happen. And so at the end of the day, I think we need you to lead us. And if we're not following you now, over time, if you build your movement, we will follow. And I know that that places the onus on you, and that's probably not necessarily the best thing to hear. But at the end of the day, that's what we've seen historically, and we need you now more than ever to move that forward. The last thought I had just on closing, and I wish I had mentioned it earlier, one crisis I feel that we're faced with is this ongoing antagonistic or not so antagonistic but not great relationship between communities and teachers unions. We have to figure this out, because if we don't figure out that tension, it'll continue to be a space where not only folks will divide us, but we'll even divide each other. We have to get past that. We have to be able to authentically listen to each other so we can build power on the ground. Until we do that, we're going to be in trouble.
Amazing, thank you. Wendy, final thoughts?
One day, kids could walk out of school for one day and say, we are not going back into these schools until these schools are worthy of our country and of the state. That's one thing I would say. The other is we have media now that's just not traditional media. We got 200 cable channels, we have Twitter, we have all these kinds of blogs and posts. We need to start creating our own powerful media around this. We can do that and be very, very clear about it. The other is we need to figure out some kind of bank account, some kind of dollar, so that we are buying stock at Fox, so that we have something to say about what Fox is. We are buying stock at NBC, it's, CNN. I don't even have a TV, so I can't name all these stations. But the bottom line is that we have got to get some economic power in some of the places where this news is being produced.
Give them a round of applause. So let me apologize to those of you who were not able to participate in this part of the conversation. I know you guys are here for a little bit more time, and I hope that you are able to continue the dialogue amongst yourselves as well as with the panelists. I just want to acknowledge a few of the points as we think about messages to take with us. So John encouraged us to have the fight, to acknowledge the complexion correlation, and to push for economic equality. Victor reminded students that this conversation is about you, your future, your economic viability. It's about you. Becky said to remain student focused and to fight until we can't anymore. And she amended my little tag which says teach the babies, and she reminded us that we need to love them too. Alberto encouraged strategic investments, acknowledging the brother's point about how we're losing often the message war. He encouraged the youth to lead, echoing what Victor said, and also reminded us that we need to work together, to put the ego aside and stay focused on the shared goal of ensuring that all of our kids have the opportunity to learn. And Wendy echoed all of that, encouraging activism. She suggested buying stock in Fox, a novel idea, but again asked us what would it take to get to the day when kids walk out. When she initially asked the question, what I thought about was my own experience as a student, and then that again as a teacher. And I thought that it wasn't until I graduated, when I started to travel the world, where I was able to make sense of the differences that I saw in the community that I lived in and the school that I went to. And so I thought about how difficult it is for the kid that lives in Southeast, who goes to the failing school, who has a teacher who says, I don't care about you and I don't think you can learn, who has the classmates who also haven't bought into the idea that this education game will lead to something, right? They need something different. And so I want to encourage you guys to do one of two things. One, acknowledge the role that teachers play, right? It is a thankless job. I said earlier I took a pay cut from teaching to come here to do this work, right? And far too infrequently do we forego the opportunity to simply acknowledge that what they do is God's work, right? So if you don't have kids that you can help them find a way to thank their teacher, find a way to reach out to the teacher that made your dream possible. The second thing I'm going to borrow from Bill Cosby, and this goes back to where we just were. He got in trouble for saying this a long time ago. What we need to do, what everybody on this panel has said in one way or another, is to put bodies on kids. All they need is for somebody to say, I believe in you, I think you're talented, and I'm gonna support you, right? Too seldom do they have somebody say, I'll do you one better, and I will love you unconditionally. And at the point in which we as adults can put aside all of the things that come with growing up and learning how to be polite and make your money, and go back to where we started this conversation with Victor, and with ensuring that all kids have the same opportunities we have had, right? We'll get to the point where we can come back in 5 years, but I'm not coming back to have this conversation. I'll come back to talk about the challenge of having too many people wanting to be teachers, right? We've had this conversation for far too long, a lot longer than I've been alive, right? And so what I hope is that you take, because there was a lot that was delivered, right? I'm still sitting with a lot, and we could probably talk for a lot longer. Oprah better watch it, because this is comfortable. But there was a lot discussed. I again go back to the two things that I asked you guys. You did the second one, you participated. I hope you continue that throughout your time here when you go home. But the first thing is really important. Share this information. It's the only way that we'll get to a point where this tipping point question will cease to exist. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Join me in giving this panel and David Johns another round of applause. Thank you so much. As they are taking off their mics and exiting the panel, I'm Cassie Schwerner, the Senior Vice President of Programs at the Schott Foundation. I've had the great pleasure to work with so many of you over the last several years. And I'm so excited that there's so many faces that I haven't worked with before. So please make sure if you're new to this work and new to the Schott family, you introduce yourselves to me, the Schott staff, so we can figure out how best to bring you into the work. I have a few brief announcements that I want to make before we send you off to workshops. This has been an incredibly rich conversation, and I know it's probably frustrating because we're just getting into the heart of so many of the issues that we really want to talk about over the next day and a half. The ideas that were talked about today and this morning are going to be continued in your workshops. This concept of students, young people, teachers, parents, all working in very tight coalition and partnership, really becoming that 99%, that is going to be talked about throughout. As Wendy asked the question about a student walkout, Saturday morning, we are having it called Direct Action Saturday. We are going to be talking about that kind of work and direct action. We are also going to be talking about media and telling stories. So this is really a teaser for the next day and a half. I want to make an announcement about technology. We are trying to do our part in keeping the movement connected, and some of that is through technology. So if we can, on the screen, you see the OTL campaign site. That is otlcampaign.org, and it is a continuously updated hub that provides easy access to resources, policy ideas, action coverage, and we really want you to be part of populating what is on this website for the National Opportunity to Learn campaign. On our next slide, we have state pages that are also updated. Now, this is really important for you all because we collect as much information as we can and put that information on the state pages, but obviously you are much closer to that. So if something happens in New Jersey or Denver or in LA, wherever you may be, we want you to get us that information, and we want to populate the state pages so that other people can stay linked to it. And as David John says, we are live tweeting, and you can do that by the hashtag OTL11. OTL11 is the hashtag, and it's also on your name labels. Okay, really quickly, there is free Wi-Fi in the lobby, and that's including that whole bar area, so please feel free to use that. Most of the workshops that you will be participating and the plenaries are all in this direct hub where we've been this morning and last night. Later on this afternoon, the 4 o'clock plenary is in something called the Wilson Rooms, and what you want to do is leaving out of those doors to my left. You want to walk straight down the corridor. You will see signs, you will see Schott staff, and you will see hotel personnel who can lead you to the Wilson Rooms. That's for 4 o'clock. There is one workshop change for this morning that I want to alert you to. In your program booklet, you have a half page of program workshop changes. I'm just going to tell you the one for this morning because it's immediate. That one is for the workshop called Keeping Kids in the Classroom, Organizing for Dignity and Justice in Schools. That is now in Wilson B. So that is the Wilson areas that I was just talking about, the workshops. All the 3 of the workshops are in that Wilson area, so you want to do that this morning. Also, the plenary at 4 is in the Wilson area. Okay, the rest of the plenaries are up here, but that Wilson plenary is happening this afternoon. And finally, you all have in your name tags, you have a ticket for the Hot Shot Gala Awards event tonight. This is an event that is always a lot of fun. We really hope you'll join us, and your tickets are right here, but make sure you remember that ticket and bring it with you. And so now I want to encourage you, everybody take a break. There's coffee and refreshments throughout the day in the hallway here, and we want to have people at the workshops in about 10 minutes at 10:30. Thank you all.